Welcome to the only wrestling podcast that covers the WWE developmental system from its inception to modern day. From OVW to MCW, the HWA, Deep South, FCW, and much more. Hosted by Brian Asbury and Mortimer Blankenship. Now let's dive into what could have been, what should have been. Welcome to Developmentally Speaking.
Hey, before we get in this episode, can you do us a favor? Will you go ahead and subscribe to the channel?
Will you ring that notification bell?
And if you would, give this video a like. Well, enough of that mumbo jumbo. Let's get to the episode.
Let's talk developmentally speaking, glow up, and connecting through wrestling.
Hey everybody, I'm Morty.
And I'm Brian.
And on today's episode of Developmentally Speaking, we have Ron H20 Waterman. Ron, how's it going?
It's going great, guys. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for coming on for us today. I know it's life is difficult to find time, and we appreciate that you did find time for us.
Always, buddy.
So, before we get into wrestling, what made you get into mixed martial arts?
Well, I was a college wrestler, and that was about the time that the wrestlers were just exploding in the UFC. So you had guys like Mark Coleman and Dan Severn and Mark Kerr and guys like that were being super successful. So I actually got challenged by my high school wrestling team because I was a high school teacher and a wrestling coach at the time, and they challenged me to enter a tournament in Denver called the Boss Rutan Invitational. So I took them up on the challenge, and I had 3 fights in one night and won each of them in under about 20 seconds. And John Peretti was the UFC matchmaker at that time, and he was the official that night. So he invited me right to my first UFC right after that contest. So I was pretty lucky. I got into the UFC after 3 professional fights.
Wow. Yeah. How was your time in the UFC? Now, this is back when you could almost kill a man.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, I was in there right during that sanctioning process. It was kind of a weird time for the UFC because you had governors out there trying to ban it, calling it human cockfighting, and it was just kind of a crazy time. But I knew it was going to explode one day, and it was just kind of an evolution for me, to go from wrestling to mixed martial arts. It was all the stuff we couldn't do in wrestling, so it was kind of a natural evolution. And back then, of course, it was, wrestlers could dominate the sport. You take these guys down and control them and ground and pound them, and you win. It wasn't quite as diverse as it is today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because back in the day in UFC, they had like sumo wrestlers against like kickboxers
Right.
and stuff. Like it was crazy. Like there wasn't like the strict rules that they have now. But so, how does one transition from doing that to getting into the professional wrestling business?
Well, professional wrestling was always something as a kid that I thought that I could be good at, and something I always wanted to do, so I looked up to the same guys as most people did back then. Hulk Hogan was an idol of mine, so I thought, man, this would be so cool. So I'm flying out to California to be in the very first UFC video game ever made, and the guy sitting right next to me just starts talking my ear off, and ends up that he's real good friends with Shane McMahon. So he sets up an interview for me to fly out to Stamford, Connecticut. So 2 weeks later, I'm in Stamford, Connecticut, meeting with Jim Ross and Shane and Stephanie McMahon. And right there on the spot, they offer me a 4-year developmental deal.
Wow.
So, yeah, so 6 months later, I'm standing, in Madison Square Gardens wrestling some of the top, wrestlers out there. So pretty cool experience.
Yeah, I'd say. So you went to Stanford and then you signed a 4-year deal. How was your time in Ohio Valley Wrestling? How was that transition down to?
It was a little different. You signed in the WWE, and you just, I think everybody has this picture. You're going to this Taj Mahal of wrestling, where you're going to be put in these beautiful quarters and stuff. So I show up in Evansville, Indiana at OVW the very first day, and it's like this little industrial shop, and I walk in there, but right the first day I walk in there, I walk in there and there's Mark Henry and Batista and John Cena, all these huge guys, so I was, Sylvester Turkey. And so I was like, a big fish in a small pond for a long time. So it was pretty eye opening.
Your name is always mentioned when people talk about OVW. I know John Cena mentioned you when he did Chris Jericho's podcast, and Jim Cornette talks about you. And how was your time in OVW once you got settled in the training and?
It was it wasn't a huge transition for me because I was used to working real hard, and as a college wrestler. But, we had 2-a-day practices most of the time. We worked our tail off, and, we were going to shows 2 or 3 times a week, setting up the ring ourselves. And it was a good experience for me. I mean, it was definitely eye opening. And I think a lot of people picture professional wrestling and think, oh, it can't be that hard, but there's so much more to it than people realize. And the physical demands on your body are just incredible, especially when you're wrestling, every other night and practicing twice a day. You get pretty beat up, but it was a great experience. I got to travel the world and meet a lot of cool people, and it was a lot of fun. And I, now looking back at it, I can see that, it was a platform basically for the rest of my life to work off of.
Who were your trainers down in OVW?
We had 3 pretty consistent trainers. Obviously, Danny Davis was down there helping us. Jim Cornette was, he organized most of the matches and the storylines. And then we had Rip Rogers helped for quite a while. And then Bobby Eaton also helped quite a bit.
How was working with Rip?
With Rip?
Yeah.
He was actually a really good coach. You have to listen to 4-letter words every other word out of his mouth. But besides that, I got along with Rip real well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's a very unique individual to say the least.
He's a good friend of the podcast, so we always
awesome.
we're actually from his hometown, so.
Are you really?
Yeah. So we always have to ask about Rip just because we grew up with Rip being one of our hometown heroes. So
sure.
And well, we're going to say it now. Rip Rogers needs to be in the Hall of Fame. That's just something that needs to happen because he was a miracle worker when it came to all the people he trained. And I'm sure
so much knowledge. It was great to have guys like that running your practices and helping you out because you can do nothing but get better.
Maybe not the most conventional ways, but
yeah, right.
What was your? So did they have they signed you on the spot. So was there a long-term plan for you? Did they have in place down there?
Well, I think everybody was kind of in the same boat. It's kind of a nerve-wracking position to be in when you're in OVW, especially as a developmental talent, because they're sending tapes up to WWE every week of your progress and your promos and your interviews and your in-ring work, and they would film the matches and send them up there. So, you're always wanting to wait for that call up, notification to come down that you get to call, start traveling with the guys on the real WWE roster. But it's also kind of a cutthroat business, as you know, and a lot of guys don't make it very far. There would be guys that make it for a couple of weeks and drop out, a couple of months and get cut, and other guys prospered pretty well.
Yeah, that's why we started this podcast, because I didn't believe, being from Southern Indiana, OVW was right there.
Right.
So a lot of the time back then, they would just shoot people up on TV. You were there for 2 weeks or maybe 2 years, and then you were gone. And it seems like during that time, they would just shuffle people in and out, and then without ever letting anybody reach their potential, they would just release them. Now that YouTube's around, now people can see what OVW was and who these people were before, WWE put their spin on them on the main roster. And
right.
I didn't think it was fair that that's all that people knew or remembered, because a lot of people worked really hard down in Louisville to get the spot that they got, and then for it just to be...
Or worked really hard to not even get a spot.
And then wasted away.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
5 minutes after they're there.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the class that I came up in was probably one of the most successful classes ever, with the talent that's up there at the top still today. Coming from that class that I was in there with, was pretty cool to get to work with these guys. But like you said, it's cool to see there that we're all at the starting stages, all of us, and very little professional wrestling background or any kind of training. So we all started at that same level, and it was fun to see those guys back then and to see where they're at now. A lot of them, especially, and to see their success and how hard they've worked to stay on the top.
Oh yeah. You mentioned that you stood in Madison Square Garden. So were you? How often did they put you on the road for like dark matches and?
I traveled pretty consistently for about a year, doing dark matches all over the place. Yeah, all over the U.S.
Did they have a plan for you on the main roster, or were they just testing out?
Well, that was one of the hard things about OVWs. You never really had a clear picture from WWE down, as their plans for you, or any ideas, or what they wanted you to do, or who they wanted you to be. I think they were just kind of testing everybody out to see where they're at. And coming from a group of talent like I was, I never really knew where I stood. But you just work as hard as you can and do all you can to be successful.
Oh yeah.
So from that group of talented individuals that you were part of, did you have a certain favorite person you liked to work with, or did you just like working with all of them? But was there someone that your matches just clicked, or?
Well, it's kind of strange, but Brock and I hit it off pretty much right away. We were both college wrestlers and had a lot of stuff in common. So we spent a lot of time together down in OVW. He's probably my closest friend down there. And we didn't have a lot of matches against each other. We tag teamed a lot and got to do a lot of stuff together. But he was probably one of the closest guys I have. And still today, we still hang out and get to talk a lot. So
It's great.
It's great to hear that, what 20 years plus years later.
Right.
that's right. Yeah.
Right. You always hear people talk about how OVW was an experience and how they that relationships were made, and that right there is proof that years down the road you still talk, you still hang out, catch up when you get the chance, and I find that to be amazing because OVW was a what's the word I'm looking for? Everybody was fighting for that spot, yet everybody still loved each other like a family. And
It really was. Yeah, we spent so much time together. It's hard not to get close to these guys. I mean, especially when you're practicing twice a day for over a year, almost a year and a half that I was down there. You spend so much time with these guys that they're like your family.
Oh yeah. Now, you said that you and Brock are so close. Did he reach out to you when he was making that transition from wrestling to MMA?
No, I actually met him at OVW. I'd heard a little bit about Brock, and all the guys there, of course, knew who he was. But when he got to OVW, we were introduced and kind of hit it off right from the start. And started lifting together and training together and spending a lot of time when we weren't practicing together. So turned into be a pretty cool thing because he was just at my house a couple of weeks ago, brought his family out. So
Did he ever?
he's a good guy.
Did he ever ask for advice when he started making the transition into UFC, mixed martial arts? Were you his point of contact?
Yeah, we he knew came from that fighting background, and as a fighter, you always kind of pick out the guys that you think would be successful in the UFC, and right away I knew that he would be a powerhouse just because of his wrestling background, his strength, his athletic ability. I knew that he'd be untouchable if he got in there. So, a lot of times on weekends we'd go out and we'd find an open mat somewhere and we'd go wrestle and shoot a little bit. And so yeah, when he started to make that transition, it was fun to be able to watch him. I was actually helped coach him for a couple of his fights. He flew me out to help with his training, and then I also was the teacher and coach of Shane Carlin, who was a UFC champion for a little while. So when they fought each other, I was helping Shane at the same time. Brock's a good friend of mine and was helping him a little bit on the side too. So it
Yeah.
was pretty odd to be at that fight. I wasn't going to pick a corner.
Yeah. Wow. So, I know he says him and Brock are friends, but the guts on this guy. Like, I used to shoot around and roll around on the mat with Brock. Like, just the thought of that whole thing of rolling around on the mat with Brock Lesnar makes
You both are pretty big individuals. I'd stand the hell back.
my God, like that's wow.
Work it out.
Yeah, just let them do their thing. Yeah. Whew,
We didn't have a lot of volunteers that wanted to come with us, but we did have Brian Keck down there at the time, and he was a world-class wrestler, so he would jump in with us a little bit.
So, how long did you say you were down in OVW for?
A little over a year.
So, what happened did they just release you, or was there a reason?
Well, I got called up from OVW to the traveling roster.
Mm-hmm.
Traveled with them for roster, doing dark matches for Cincinnati, and wrestled with Les Thatcher and his group at HWA for a little bit after that, and then occasionally it was just going back and forth to the main roster doing dark matches until I did get released. Saying that, and their only explanation to me at the time was that they didn't have a storyline for me.
That's dumb.
A guy that size, when I was storyline for you, I have one. He comes in and just wrecks ass, just kills everybody. Like what? How hard is that to write? I mean, look.
Yeah, it's
when you're
it's
built
frustrating because you don't get the feedback that you want. They're like,
right.
Well, you could probably go over and wrestle in Japan for a little while. So I did that. I went over and wrestled for New Japan for did a few tours over there and came back. But I had a family at the time. I had 2 boys and a wife back at home, and it's not like I can just go play around and pick up matches here and there. I had to work. So
yeah.
So let's actually talk a little bit about Japan. How was Japan? Was it what you expected it to be, or when you got there was it just a whole nother world?
It wasn't a huge shock for me because I wrestled. I mean, I fought a lot over in Japan, so I was kind of aware of their culture and how they treat their athletes over there, which is pretty amazing. It's much different than over here in the U.S. They treat you like royalty over there. You're all sumo wrestlers to them, so they roll out the red carpet for you over there. But I was treated really good in New Japan. Had some big matches over there, and it was a lot of fun.
So I'll ask you the same thing I asked Sly Turkai. Do you have a Ribera jacket?
I do not have a Ribera jacket.
Man, darn. I've always said, like, one of my goals. I've been a professional wrestling manager for about 12 years, and one of my goals has always been to. I don't care if it's managing jobbers. I want to manage in Japan, at least for one tour, just so I can go over there, experience it, and try to get my Ribera jacket. I don't know if they make a size that fits me, but we'll try. Well, I mean, they do. They have sumo wrestlers, so they might have one that fits me. Yeah,
It is hard to find stuff that fits you over there. Believe me.
So
and the food is so small portions over there. It's hard to get used to that too.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I
just
would
keep it coming.
I would go to a ramen shop and just go to town on ramen. Yeah, for sure.
So how's life been after wrestling?
It's been amazing. Right when I was soon after I got released, I had a buddy of mine, Rico Constantino, who was also got called up for a short time up in WWE. And he had traveled on a group called the Power Team, and I told him that was something I would always was always interested in. So he gave me the contact to a guy down in Dallas, Texas, team called Team Impact, and I wrote him an email saying I would be interested in traveling with this group, and they flew me out there the next week, and I've still traveled with them, 25 years later now, and travel around the world doing feats of strength with
What about to say?
professional football players and bodybuilders.
Team Impact is what you said?
Yeah.
Like the guys that like bend the metal pans and like you do. It's
Share
like
phone books.
it's Christian, right?
Yeah, we're a Christian organization, so we get to share our testimonies. We do school programs.
Yes.
I actually just got back from Argentina 3 days ago. I was out there
That's
for
awesome.
a week with those guys.
He's on Team Impact, dude. I love Team Impact when I was younger, man. They came to Seymour, and they were at Calvary Baptist Church here in Seymour. And
Yep.
I mean, I don't know if that would have been time that you were in it, but
I think Mark Henry.
I was in Seymour, so that might have been on that team.
oh, that is so cool.
Did Mark Henry do it for a little bit?
Because that was back in the day. I think he did a show with them one time. But
Yeah, he might have done it with them. Yeah, but
that's back like when ripping a phone book actually meant something.
Right.
Nowadays, anybody can rip a phone book in half. But I remember watching.
You can't even find a phone book today.
Right. But I remember ripping a phone book in half and bending a frying pan, taking like rebar and just making a pretzel out of it and stuff. It was cool. One guy, the one that I was at, I think I remember a guy like shoulder tackled a bunch of
Ice.
ice. Yes.
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 Yeah, we do them all the time. 10 feet of ice.
Awesome. See, we've also had Rico on our show. We did a episode about him because we couldn't get in contact with him. Somebody had him, got with him and said, "Hey, watch this," and he appreciated it so much that he actually came on and talked with us. We got to do a revisited episode with him, so it was really cool because, like, we're talking about OVW. Everybody knows the Big Four. The Big Four: Brock, and I always mess it up. Brock, Batista, Orton. See, my brain doesn't work fast enough sometimes when I say names. But we like what we call the original four, which is the Damaja, Doug Basham, Nick Dinsmore, Rob Conway.
Yeah,
but we include a fifth, and that's Rico. Those are like the top five guys for us. Because
awesome.
That's who we that's the first one. If I remember OVW, the beginning of OVW when I was a kid,
that's who you remember.
That's who I remember.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it's so cool that you're on Team Impact. That's one of those that's wow. That's
it's been a blessing. I've been traveling with these guys for a long time, but it's not a full-time job anymore. But it was for about 5 years.
That's amazing. It's amazing that you still get to travel the world and go overseas, and it seems like you haven't slowed down.
No, I haven't. I'm still all over the place. I own a real estate company now. I'm a full-time firefighter, paramedic. Still do a lot of school programs on my own where I get to do motivational assemblies, and it's awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Like all the stuff you've done, you've had a very full life, and you're continuing on with it. That's awesome. Yeah. You've lived more life than some people that that are 90 years old. So that's impressive for sure. Is there anything that you would like to plug or share with everybody?
Well, I am getting into acting now. I was signed by an agent out of New Mexico, so I've got a couple of movies coming up here. One's called Doc, where I'm the main actor in that. So it's hopefully going to come out in the next year or two. They're still in the funding process of that, but so that's a new endeavor that I've got coming up, and hopefully it takes off. My daughter and I both got signed. She's a great little actor too. She's only 8 years old, and
awesome.
It's a lot of fun.
So when it comes to movies, talk to Mike Bucci. Nova. He actually does movies down in the Louisville area.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There's that company down
Mike
there
Bucci,
too.
Huh?
Yeah. So he's doing a bunch of stuff. He's actually like the head of one of those companies down right now. So he's in the Louisville area. So yeah. Simon Dean, Nova, Mike Bucci, whatever you want to call him. Yeah, he actually was talking about how he wanted to get us in some movies with him. So it'd be pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, for sure. But yes, thank you so much for coming on today, taking time to talk with us. Like I said, we know you're a very busy person because we all are, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Anytime.
Thank you.
You have a great day.
God bless you guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Later. Hey everybody, it's Morty.
It's Brian.
And thank you for watching today's episode of Developmentally Speaking.
If you could, please click that subscribe button.
And don't forget to punch that bell icon so you can get notified whenever we go live or drop a new video every Monday. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next
Developmentally Speaking.